Here we go. So, welcome all. I will try to give you some feedback, some personal thoughts about the project Activate CF. However, this project was done by many people. Quite a few of them are in the audience right now, and many more who are not here today. Just to give you some idea about the project, we started planning the study actually in 2011 at the ECFS exercise meeting and later on at the NACFC meeting. It took us 3 years to really have the first patient in, 4 years to have as many patients as we could get, not as many as we expected. And finally, the paper was published, actually it's 2021, so it's 10 years. So it was published in November last year. So 10 years for this project. So what did it really make it so difficult to do? It was a multinational project with many centers in different countries. As you can appreciate here, it's in the end, it was 8 countries, but we also talked to the Australians. We had a lot of sponsors, which sounds nice, but which makes things really difficult if you think about contracts, different ideas, different thoughts, different wishes from different areas. And we did have a lot of materials, for the project, including a self-program website as an activity diary. And all this had to be approved by ethics in all centers, and all the materials had to be translated, and we had 4 languages in the end. So this was really a big challenge in the beginning for the first years, really to start off the project. Our aim was pretty simple. We wanted to check whether a partially supervised exercise intervention lasting 12 months, along with regular motivation, feedback, and cystic fibrosis had any beneficial effects on a lot of different outcomes. We intended to recruit patients 12 years and older, FEV1 35% and higher, so no upper limit. And we wanted to restrict the recruitment to people who have an intense physical activity of maximal 4 hours per week. So we excluded all the athletic people with cystic fibrosis. Exclusion criteria was pretty simple. Everybody who was doing too much intense physical activity or was unable to exercise at all or had a recent change in therapy. There were more exclusion criteria like pregnancy and so forth, but these are pretty common to studies in cystic fibrosis. The intervention group was asked to add 3 hours of intense activities per week on top of their baseline activity. So we told everybody, if you report your baseline activity, be honest. If you make yourself too active, you may have to add 4 or 5 hours to the real baseline. But if you make yourself too inactive, then obviously when you get to the control group, you may even have to reduce your activity, which was not the intent in the study. So we talked to them, and in the intervention group, we had motivational interviewing, activity contracts, which were to be signed, pedometers, and the web-based activity diary, daily diary, to the patients to motivate really physical activity increments. We intended to recruit 306 patients into the trial, and we had feedback in our feasibility from all the centers, and actually, if you look at the numbers, in the end, you would expect 300 and some patients to be recruited. One of the lessons learned is there were not 300 and some patients recruited into the trial. Yeah, this is the actual recruitment and flow through the study. There were 155 patients recruited, but quite a few of these had to be excluded for different reasons. Some were recruited only at the end of the trial to have enough patients for some sub-analysis at baseline. Quite a few patients had to be excluded because randomization did not follow the protocol of the study. This is another lesson. Yeah, it is very difficult if you have many centers across the world to motivate everybody, every investigator and every patient, every participant to do what is written in the protocol. So we lost quite a few patients there. So in the end, only 117 were really randomized according to protocol. 115 received treatment, which we thought was pretty good, because quite a few patients obviously hoped for intervention group and were randomized to control group. So we expected more patients to quit the study and say, I'll start my training anyway, and vice versa. Some people said, I hope for the control group because I will be really in trouble if I have to exercise. And we lost one patient each really in the control and the intervention group, which is pretty good. For the intention to treat analysis, obviously, we had all these data. We had nearly 100 patients with complete data, which I think, given that we only had 117 to start with, this is pretty good. If you look at the results, one of the questions obviously was, are we able to increase physical activity in our patients? And we had different measures here. We had reported activity by patients. You remember they were supposed to increase by 3 hours their intense activity. On average, it was about 2 hours. The control group was supposed not to change. They reported no big changes. When we looked at pedometry, our pedometers were able to also give us something called aerobic steps. This is a step count when the participant walks for at least 10 minutes with at least 60 steps per minute, and then the steps are counted. And there was a significant difference between the control group and the intervention group. You wonder why this didn't increase. We feel that maybe quite a few patients at baseline, having this nice pedometer, used it and walked more than they usually did. So the difference here we feel is real, while the baseline value may be a little bit overestimated. Looking at cycle ergometry, peak work rate increased in the intervention group, decreased somewhat in the control group. And with peak oxygen uptake, we had a significant difference also after 12 months. So our intervention seemed to work. However, when we look at the primary outcome, which is the forced expiratory volume in 1 second, the control group showed some increase after 6 months, while the intervention group did not. And this is not due to some outliers. It seems to be a real signal here. And when you look at the FEV1 over the 12 months period, especially at 6 months, we see a significant difference here. Or if we look at interpolated data, which is this graph on the right, this is intention to treat analysis. Again, at 6 months, we see quite some difference. And the difference is not so much because the intervention group decreased in lung function. It is more because the control group increased in lung function. However, there's some possible signal in the decrement in lung function also in the intervention group. Interpretation in the end was that possibly the control group started some exercise. Yeah, they were highly motivated when they joined the study, while possibly in the intervention group, the exercise was too much. Yeah, starting with 3 additional hours per week. Some may have just been too tired. There was some signal that the intervention group participants actually had more infections, more exacerbations, very close to the visits at 6 months. So possibly this is the explanation. That's the data. It took us quite a while to discuss this. And we said, okay, it's the largest exercise intervention trial to date, and it worked. The good news is we got it published. You can read about it, and it's open access, so it's no problem to download the paper. The real PDF is not ready yet. It's still our Word file, but you have access to the paper. So what did I learn? This is my personal opinions, and we discuss it afterwards. Yeah, you run into problems with recruitment if you do a trial. Yeah, unless you are in your own center, yeah, and you have access directly to patients, it's really difficult, especially if you have to compete with well-funded drug trials. And at that time, there were several Vertex studies going on. So we had the feeling that for some centers and for some patients, obviously, joining a modulator therapy trial was more appealing than an activity trial. Second thing, yeah, co-workers changed in many centers. And if you have a highly motivated person, when you start talking to ethics and to patient organizations, yeah, this person may not be there when you start really doing the trial. Or even throughout the trial, a person may change or leave. So interest of center staff may decrease during long-term trials. The complex funding strategies prohibit really direct influence on what is done in the centers and in the countries. We did have a monitoring system in place for international monitoring, and we talked to the centers across the world. In some centers I visited, but you cannot go everywhere several times a year. A very interesting experience I had was that small but highly motivated, possibly unexperienced centers were really good in recruiting and following the protocol. While the large centers, yeah, who are involved in many international trials, sometimes experience more problems with conducting the trial. Another problem, and this is exercise intervention, you cannot blind your patients, and you don't have the magic pill which is manufactured somewhere in the world and nobody knows what's in there. In exercise trials, the control patient knows I'm not exercising, while the exercise patient does know that he's exercising. So the control patients really may start to exercise, and I don't know how to control for this. Possibly these nice activity monitors, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, yeah, will help to identify yeah, some problems with the control group in the future. But for us, we couldn't really tell that the control patients did more exercise. We feel they did, but we couldn't show. Another thing, yeah, if you design an exercise intervention trial, it seems easy, yeah, but the more stringent your control is, the more important it may be to start slowly and increase exercise, yeah, intensity and volume slowly from week to week, and not start with 3 hours additional exercise per week right from the start. You know, in the mucotrain trial, which we did 20 years ago, our feeling was the patient knew exactly how much they were able to do. So they increased their physical activity the way they felt. This time we had much more control what they were doing. So possibly some of them just over-exercised in the beginning. And for myself, yeah, given the 9 or 10 years to complete the project, yeah, I'm running too old now for another such study. So if there's somebody in the room, yeah, who wants to do this, yeah, think about 10 years of your lifetime. Some personal conclusions, possibly running huge international multi-center trials will be really, really difficult if you look at exercise trials. If you have a company who's spending 100 million euro, dollars, pounds, yeah, it won't be a problem. But if you run a relatively low budget study, it will be very difficult. So possibly the best way to go is to have well-designed, smaller, single or multi-center projects which address specific questions, yeah, and aim for a 1 or 2 year intervention, but they have a common data set, common SOPs, so you can run combined analysis in the end, either as combining source data, which probably is the easiest way of doing, or at least to have meta-analysis. My feeling is this is much more easier to do and probably brings us, yeah, to better results in the end. Thank you very much.